Meus senhores, boa tarde. Mais uma vez, bem-vindos ao 6º Lisbon Motorcycle Film Fest. Desta vez tivemos há pouco às 2 da tarde as habituais talks com os nossos convidados, pessoas ligadas à produção, à realização, à edição, dos filmes que têm estado a passar nesta edição do festival. Hoje temos uma talk muito especial com alguém que não está ligado a nenhum dos filmes que estão no programa desta edição do Film Fest, mas alguém que é muito especial e que todos vós, se não o conheceram antes, vão conhecê-lo antes, mas de certeza conhecem o seu trabalho. Ele é o homem que esteve ligado a todas as imagens, praticamente, da série Long Way, que todos os motociclistas conhecem. É o Claudio von Planta. Claudio, welcome again to our Film Fest. You're from Switzerland. You have studied politics in the University of Zurich. You have served in the Swiss Army. You have been in jail in Pakistan for 1 month. You interviewed Osama bin Laden. You were in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen. You crashed a bike in Africa. But you are well known within the motorcycle community by being the man behind the camera on the Long Way series. You have a fantastic curriculum. You have been behind the camera around the globe in so many different environments. You have a lot of experience. I dare to ask you how it started.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. It's very nice to come to Lisbon. I have been here 2-3 times before, but always busy with filming. I think last time, it's quite a while ago, I was filming the last Dakar rally, leaving here in Lisbon. It was 2006, the last time. So generally, the way I got into documentary filmmaking, I was in Switzerland.
Excuse me, Claudio. We have some slides of you in loop, so you can tell the story, and we'll look at the images, and then if you want to comment some of them, you can do it.
So my career started with this. This was in 1985 in Afghanistan. And the reason why I kind of stumbled into this documentary filmmaking business is I always tried to find a job which gave me pretext to travel, to get out of Switzerland. I was stuck in Switzerland. My parents had this idea, this educational principle that children shouldn't travel before they know their own country. So the first time I left Switzerland was at 16, with the result that for the rest of my life, I only wanted to get away from Switzerland and see everything else. And so I started my studies in political science in Zurich, because I thought that's probably a good kind of direction for journalism. But I was never very good with writing. And I thought if I do something based on images, and particularly not only stills images, but video and film. At the beginning it was still film, but it was just the start of video technology as well. And I thought during my first holidays it would be interesting to do a little news report. Nothing kind of fancy, big, but maybe just a few minutes. And I was, looking at the map of the world, wondering, what's a good area. I knew, as somebody with no name, no track record, I needed to go somewhere where I don't have competition. And at the time, all the major media organizations here in the Western world, they went to Latin America and conflicts like Nicaragua and El Salvador and places like that. So I knew I shouldn't go there, I can't compete. But then I decided to go to Afghanistan, because there was already quite a serious conflict. The Russians invaded in 1979, And when I came in '85, they had already loads of refugees in Pakistan and in Iran, but absolutely no information. And I had, as you mentioned, I had previously, before I went to university in Switzerland, everybody has to do military service there, and that was useful at the time when everybody has to do it, and I wasn't particularly keen, but you have to do it anyway, and I thought, if already it's, you can't escape, I better do something where I learn something interesting. And so I went to special forces for the mountains. We were trained in guerrilla warfare, and during my career later, I realized it was actually really good education. And in places like Afghanistan, I realized that it was super quality. And the essence was I knew a lot about weapons, just normal infantry weapons and explosives and mines and machine guns, all the kind of basic weapons and the effects of it. And then when I ended up with the Mujahideens, you are not that much frightened because I knew the sound, I got used to it. And so it was in Afghanistan.
And you were best prepared than them in some way.
That's what I realized. Obviously, for them, they were just kind of out of nowhere. When the Russians invaded in '79, suddenly they had to go and defend themselves, and they never really had proper training. They just have to pick up some old weapons. Eventually they get more and more kind of modern weapons, but it was very basic. And from what I learned in the Swiss army, I clearly had more know-how than them. It was just good for my own survival, not that I used it, but it was, and that's how I ended up there. And then when I came back, I just had a rucksack full of Super 8 films. Each roll was 3 minutes, and the whole rucksack altogether was maybe 3 hours of footage altogether. And I went there for 3 months. So I had 3 hours of footage, 3 months, and everywhere you went, you had to go on foot. And then later I came back and managed to sell the footage to Antenne 2 in France, in Paris, for a little news feature. And so that was my entry into the TV business. And the editor of that program, that news program, after the show, he called me in his office and he asked, what will you do next? And I said, I need to go back to Switzerland to finish my studies. And he said, are you serious? I don't care about your studies. I need people like you. Would you go back to Afghanistan? And I said, what do you mean? Yeah, we need people like you to cover that story. Nobody wants to go there. And so I straight away had a commission to go back. And that's how I got my foot into the door with TV. Yeah.
You have been back to Afghanistan several years later. You've been there recently, 2017, I think, with the British Army, I believe.
Yeah.
Doing some work with them also for TV documentary, I think.
Yeah.
But immediately after your first trip to Afghanistan, you have been, we saw a picture just a minute ago, you have been to Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, on the western side, Irian Jaya it was called. Today it was called West Papua. So it's the western part of New Guinea.
And you made Rebels of the Forgotten World.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so really the beginning of my career was very much focusing on some hidden conflicts where most people didn't really hear something about it. And as well as a freelancer, that was good because you didn't have competition, nobody else went there. And I knew by chance, I did a backpacking trip in Indonesia after school. And on that trip, I came to the western part of New Guinea, which is occupied by Indonesia. And I realized something was wrong there. But I couldn't get any information, nothing in the newspapers, nowhere. And then after a while, I suddenly discovered a little story about a mission pilot who got kidnapped by a local guerrilla organization. And suddenly when I saw this little Reuters report in a Swiss newspaper, I realized, something is happening there. And it's basically very similar to what happened in East Timor. So here in Portugal, you are very aware about it.
Exactly.
So the same thing happened to the Papuans in West Papua, where the Indonesian army invaded in 65. And so I knew that's another place I need to go. And that's what I managed to do in 89. It was kind of a crazy operation, because I knew you can't go officially, fly to Irian Jaya, that's the capital in West Papua. I knew you can't, because they just block you. If any foreigners go there, they let you go only into one place which they control. It's the Wamena Valley. It's up in the interior of West Papua in the mountains, and that's the place where they let tourists go. And everything else, they block you, because they are afraid that you got in touch with the resistance movement. So the way I got in was through a friend of mine, who, as a medical doctor, he made connections with the Papuan guerrilla movement in refugee camps on the Papua New Guinea side, because lots of Papuans from West Papua escaped to Papua New Guinea, and they were in refugee camps. And my friend, he managed to have access there because he was a medical doctor. And then through one of the leaders of the Papuan resistance movement, they're called OPM, Organisasi Papua Merdeka, basically freedom movement. He said, look, you have a problem with your struggle because nobody knows about it, but I have a friend who would be prepared to make a film, but you need to help us. And so, okay, what do we need to do? And said, look, the only way he can get in is if you prepare an airstrip, a clandestine airstrip in the middle of the jungle, so that he can fly in. And basically the pilot who was kidnapped before, he agreed to fly me in because he actually totally sympathized with the local Papuan guerrilla fighters. Yeah. And so that's the story how I got into this place.
Yeah. And later you have been in Sudan with refugees. You have been in Iraq also after Saddam, or maybe before?
Even
also?
Before, yeah.
Before?
Yeah, before and after.
Yeah. You have been in this kind of environment and scenario for a couple of times. It's a stupid question, I know, but have you ever feared for your life? Doing your job? Being a journalist or a cameraman?
The most dangerous moment happened very much at the beginning with the Afghans. That taught me a lesson. Because it was really it was crazy. When I went there, I felt, my own military service is a little bit a joke, because what the Swiss don't really know anything about modern warfare. It's just theoretical, because we haven't been involved in proper wars. First World War, we stayed out. Second World War, no worries. So it was all a little bit kind of in theory, and I didn't take it seriously. And I felt these Afghans, they clearly must know what they are doing, because they had already a few years of experience, proper, serious warfare. And I was a little bit naive, just following them everywhere, not really questioning it. And then one day I was in a situation where they said, we would like to do an attack against a Russian post to capture weapons and ammunition. And said, okay, they must know what they were doing. But it was a complete suicide operation, really, really crazy. And they were not even exploring the place to figure out the best way to organize the attack. They were just running against this post, and the closer they got, suddenly, I saw these tripwires, which means that it was suddenly minefield. And they just kept on running through the minefields. And I said, bloody. So that was the most dangerous thing. And then I just knew I need to go. I couldn't return because I was with them. But I obviously was very careful where I step. And I went only there where the guy in front of me. Yeah, and then eventually he blew up. Jesus. So that was definitely the most dangerous situation.
Yeah. We go into motorcycles in a minute, but I almost forgot that this is the motorcycle film fest. But I can't resist to ask you. You really interviewed Osama bin Laden before the 9/11.
Yeah.
Could you tell us?
Yeah, at the
just
time.
The story?
At the time, it was. So it was after the first Gulf War, and what happened in the first Gulf War in '91. The Americans still left Saddam in power, and it was very curious why they left him there. And the impression, the only thing which makes sense to me, they actually still wanted to keep him there as a threat factor. Because with Saddam in power, with still all his Republican Guard still intact, because they were not involved in the fighting. So he still had quite a lot of military power. And in this position, he was still a big threat for the neighboring countries, particularly Saudi Arabia. And the Americans then got the permission from Saudi Arabia to build up military camps in Saudi Arabia. So, that was a major thing for the Saudi regime to accept the Americans, the unbelievers, non-Muslims, setting up military bases in Saudi Arabia. This is like, how can you justify that as the regime in Saudi Arabia, in the Holy Land, with Mecca and Medina? It was like impossible, and it was only they could justify it because they could say, look, the big dangerous man is still sitting there. And so then the Americans started to set up military bases, and that was upsetting people like bin Laden and all kind of proper true believing Muslims who dream about basically what they do. They dream about a proper real Islamic state the way it was existing during Muhammad's time. That was somehow the vision still today. Most of Islamic fundamentalists, they still dream, even ISIS much later, that's the dream. They would like to have, a proper Islamic state with Islamic laws, the way it was to Muhammad's time. And they feel that a regime like Saudi Arabia is just a farce, because they pretend to be Islamic, but actually it's totally corrupt, and all the princes, they drink, and they it's lots of un-Islamic behavior, and so setting up the American military bases, that was just a crystallization to kind of connect all these Muslims who just didn't agree. They said, look, we need to work against it. And then bin Laden and the people around him, they started systematically organizing attacks against American interests. And so there were attacks against these American military installations in Saudi Arabia. And then later they attacked the American embassies in Africa. And so I had a friend of mine, a very, very experienced investigative journalist, kind of old style. He was around for a long time. He's quite a bit older like me. And he got onto this bin Laden story. And it was before 9/11, where only specialists with connections to secret services, they knew that bin Laden and his people, you need to watch them. And so it was Quinn Roberts was his name. It was him who actually got onto the story, and he got me on board because he hasn't been in Afghanistan before. And I had all the Afghan experience, so that was the combination. But at the beginning, when he knocked at my door, I wasn't really aware about bin Laden myself, how crucial that man is. Yeah. And so that's how we got to him in '96. So it was just after the Taliban took over in Kabul. That was summer '96, and we managed to get there in November '96.
That's why somebody called you the badass motorcycle director of photography from the Long Way series. that kind of stuff.
Yeah, maybe.
Made you famous. Made you famous. How'd you get into the Long Way series? I know that you also filmed the Race to Dakar with Charley Boorman.
Yeah.
How did it happen?
So the Long Way, the first one, Long Way Round, that was it started in April 2004, and really it came totally out of the blue. I think it was the only project where I just got a telephone call out of the blue. Normally, as a freelancer, you get recommendations. That's how you get your jobs. But here, it was out of the blue, because the Long Way production team, they were desperate to find, just 2 weeks before departure, they still didn't have somebody to film. They interviewed loads and loads of people, but they were not happy, it didn't work out. And 2 weeks before, still nobody to film it. And then some people in the production team, they started to look at websites all the time, everywhere. And somebody saw my website, and then they called me. So I went to see them in London. And I think very quickly, Ewan and Charley, they decided to get me on board because they were impressed that I could work on my own. I think that was the key. They could see, because I had all this experience in kind of difficult places, in war zones where you only operate on your own. You can't have a big team. So for me, it was totally normal. I could, I can shoot, I can direct. If necessary, I could even edit. And I said I can ride motorcycles, but that was a little bit of a problem because I didn't have the license anymore. But But it was out of the blue. Yeah.
But the Race to Dakar,
that was later. That was in 2000.
Later. Okay. It was after Long Way Round.
Yeah, that was
Okay. And then there is the episode of the Lances.
Oh yeah, that's
because you were ready to go.
Yeah, it's just such a silly story.
That's why we like it.
I grew up in Switzerland, and at 18 you can get your driving license. And then I knew in Switzerland, if you do the truck license first, you then get everything else as a gift. So you get the car license, you get the bike license, you get everything. So I originally started with a truck license in Switzerland. And then when I ended up in the UK, I went there to edit this Papuan film in 1990. That's why I ended up in the UK, and I stayed there. And then 93, they forced me to switch the Swiss license to a UK license, if you are resident there. And then in the UK license, they didn't recognize all my other licenses, which I had. So I only had car and little bikes up to 125. And I was too lazy to complain. I didn't really do anything about it, because in London, I only had a little scooter, and I didn't really care. I didn't need the big bike license anymore until Long Way Round. And as I said, it was like 2 weeks before start. And then, of course, they wanted to have my license for insurance policies. And I suddenly read, oh, shit, I don't have it. Well, don't have it anymore. And then I was looking, could I switch back to my Swiss license? But there's not enough time. It was not possible. So I said, okay, I need to do the license. Practical. I just needed to do the practical one. And I booked the date, and then of course I failed.
to help. Yeah.
So and that was cool to see. Any other film production team, they hire you as a cameraman, and you don't, for a motorcycle film, and you don't even have a license. They would just drop you. How can you? It's impossible. You can't do it. But it just shows you the kind of the mentality of the two producers, Russ is the British guy, and Alexanian is American. And they, and obviously Ewan and Charley as well. They were kind of the four together. They started this company for the Long Way series. And they just kept me on board. They said, who cares about motorcycle license in Siberia? We have seen that you can drive. So what's the problem? But still, we felt I should try and do it a second time. And unfortunately, you have to wait 10 days. So we already started the trip, and then I had to fly back from Czech Republic back to London. I did it, and then I passed it, fortunately. So everybody was relieved.
Yeah. And then you went. Some people say or believe that this kind of adventure, like the long way round, with a big crew of production behind the two solo riders, is some kind of a fake, you know. What are you were very you have the habit to work with yourself alone, in autonomy, absolutely, and then you see yourself into this big production crew,
bigger production team.
What was your feeling about that?
Yeah, there is an aspect to it where you can say it's a little bit fake, because there are other people who really did it on their own. I think Enduro Mondo, they were the first guys who actually did the similar trip across Siberia, you know, just a bunch of guys on their own. And I'm always very impressed by people who doing it like that. But I could see, you know, with Long Way Round, it's a slightly a different story if you travel with a Hollywood star. And it was just briefly after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and everything was very unsafe. You knew already in all these former Soviet countries, everything was controlled by mafia connections. And we all thought there is quite a risk for kidnap and ransom. You know, have a Hollywood star, you can make money with that. And so that was a major fear. So you can't just be totally naive and say, oh yeah, no, we are nice guys.
It's impossible to go anonymous.
So you have to, you know, be quite a little bit better prepared. So in the support crew, it was still very, very small. You know, if you imagine shows like Top Gun, they have like 50, 60 people.
Yeah.
And for us, we were about 8. So it's still very small. And most of the time on the Long Way Round, that's where I felt as well we had the most interesting sequences. This was just the 3 of us, you know, you and Charlie, myself, on the bikes.
The Long Way Down?
On the Long Way Round.
Oh, okay.
So I think about 80% of the show, we were really just the 3 of us. But we have the guys behind us from the production team, just in case if something goes wrong. It was more a safety thing.
Yeah.
From the filming point, I still felt it was very close to what I was used just on my own, because I was just with Ewan and Charlie on the bike. And then we teamed up mainly in kind of bigger cities when we had special events with UNICEF, because Ewan, as a UNICEF ambassador, was keen to focus on these projects. And that's where we came with the production team and on the borders for the paperwork.
Yeah. It was difficult for you to ride the motorcycle in a very difficult environment, and also thinking of your own job, filming, capture all the scenes and so on. It was mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's because I didn't really have much experience off-road.
The expertise of,
I always was riding bikes since I was a teenager, but mainly in cities, just to get between the traffic and be faster than cars. And off-road or big tours, I didn't do it. But Ewan and Charlie, they didn't worry about it, because the only one who had off-road experience was Charlie. And Ewan was the same like me.
Yeah.
And so he said, look, doesn't matter, we just learn it as we go along on the trip. And of course, we were falling over.
All the time. all the time.
And then they started to pick up the camera whenever I fell down. They started to so that's how suddenly my face appeared in the show as well.
It happens. They fall, and you don't get the image. Ask them to fall again.
Yeah, no,
not that. I missed it. Do you mind?
Missed the shot.
Do you mind? Okay. I don't know if I'm sure you do. In the motorcycle aspect of Long Way Round, something changed after that big success, because it was a big success, essential for BMW, and definitely. After Long Way Round, before Long Way Round, BMW was, I'm sorry, BMW is our main sponsor. Probably I shouldn't say this, but BMW was the bike of police agents and old people.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
After the Long Way Round,
It changed.
BMW was the cool bike to go around the globe, and you know, and it's because of that. Yeah.
And I'm really annoyed that I didn't get shares in BMW.
Yeah.
It's different. It's different now with Long Way Up.
Yeah.
Which was Harley.
Harley, yeah.
With electric, the live wire.
Yeah.
Before the show went out in Apple TV, I bought shares. And it's very good because they went up.
Smart move. Smart move. After the Long Way Round, the Long Way Down. It was something that you, when you finished Long Way Round, the three of you or the whole crew, you thought, no, you have to do something. We have to do a saga. We have to keep going on this theme because there are more country to go. There are a lot of places to go, and this was great. Let's do it again. It was like that, or it's just?
Yeah, no. It was as I mean, like the whole idea was born originally between Ewan and Charley, the Long Way Round, and then they got Russ and David on board as producers to help them organize the logistics and the sponsorship, and it's a big job. And they enjoyed a lot the Long Way Round, and they just felt it would be cool to continue. And since the beginning, they were thinking, we need a long way down and we need a long way up, like a trilogy. Yeah. And so the Long Way Down, it happened in 2007. And again, they asked me to come along, which was fun because the whole team, we kind of knew each other already. And it just felt the right thing. And then the strange thing was it took a long time for the Long Way Up.
Yeah, a long time, yeah.
Everybody was waiting, when do you do the Long Way Up?
Yeah. And which one do you prefer, not as a motorcyclist, but as a filmmaker? The Long Way Round or the Long Way Down? Or the Long Way Up?
Yeah, it's always the first one which is the most interesting because it's fresh and it's unspoiled, because on Long Way Round at the beginning, first of all, TV was not really interested.
Yeah.
And it became only a success in TV after we shot it. And it's strange because the TV editors at the beginning, they didn't see how this can be interesting. Just guys riding motorbikes. That must be boring.
Crazy.
Day in, day out, they're just riding motorbikes. Why should this be interesting? They were desperate to have like a competition between you and Charley, or like a game or something silly. Yeah. Like Big Brother style nonsense.
Yeah. And TV reality show.
Or they wanted to own all the rights. And then of course if you have a Hollywood star, why should he give away the rights for this doesn't make sense. So they effectively managed to produce it just on their own with no TV. And the first TV station who showed the show was Sky, which was very little money because Charley had a cousin who was in a important position in Sky, and he saw it on a party, and that's why he went on Sky. And only afterwards, it was a slow burner. Suddenly it went on to National Geographic and then BBC, and then suddenly it went all around the world. And then the second time, with Long Way Down across Africa, suddenly it's only becoming more commercial, and that's why it becomes more difficult. So the story is less pure, because with all the commercial interests from TV stations, from sponsors, from whatever, they all expect something, which then takes away, or it makes your story more cumbersome. And so fortunately, as the guy behind the camera, I didn't have to worry too much. I still enjoyed the trip and discover all these countries and so on. But I know on the production side it was much tougher. Yeah.
And the Long Way Up is another different story, because it was initiative of Harley Davidson, I believe. or it was Charley and Ewan. And Ewan, they wanted to do that one also, and Harley came along, or it was the other way around.
Basically, it's always coming down to Ewan, because he's such a busy man with all his acting jobs, one film after the other, and it all depends whether he is ready to take time off to do another one, and so. It just happened in 2019. He said, yes, I can take out another year. Because he realizes riding motorcycle is very good for his mind. You have to be careful as an actor. As an actor, or, other stressful jobs as well, you have to be careful not to burn out. And so I think he's quite good. He's in touch with his mind and his body, and he just knows when to say stop. And it just happened, he was ready again in 2019, and it's an idea I floated a long time ago. If ever they do the long way up, it should be electric, because I filmed the first electric car in 2010 doing the Pan American Highway from Alaska all the way down to
Racing Green.
Racing Green.
That film.
Exactly. That was a series for the BBC. And it's the first time I did something with electric mobility. And it was just the beginning of Tesla, when everybody was laughing at Elon Musk, saying, he's just a rich guy, doesn't know what to do with his money. But when I did this electric car, this was just a bunch of engineering graduates from Imperial College in London. They wanted to prove to the world that electric cars can have a long range. And so they built like a racing car and had a big battery for 54 kilowatt hours, and it gave them a range about 500 kilometers. And they say, look, we want to prove that this works, this is reliable. You don't need to have range anxiety, because everybody was worried with electric cars, the battery is flat too fast, and then you stand somewhere and you can't charge. So through this trip, I discovered that there's a lot of potential in e-mobility. And then, fortunately, with Long Way Up, we actually took the decision to do it electric, because it needed to be something new, something pioneering. We knew there will be problems, because these bikes, they were not conceived, not constructed for touring bikes. They were, these live-wire Harleys, they were set up for people who commute into cities. They live outside big cities, and then they drive into town for their jobs and go back. So they have a range of 150 miles. But for touring, that's not enough. You want to have like 300 miles, 400 miles if possible. But for the Long Way Up, it was quite good to have that problem, a little bit of an obstacle. So it's the first time somebody did it, and it was quite quite fun.
Nice, Did you edit the films also, or just you were just with a camera? Did you edit?
No. I really was just
the cameraman
on the camera side.
Some people might think that Ewan and Charley, being stars and people from the movies, they are very special. How are they? I know Charley personally. He's a very cool guy and relaxed. I believe Ewan
It's the same.
Could be the same.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You have a fantastic relationship with them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, it was just cool to work with them. Absolutely, no attitudes, nothing.
Yeah, no star. No
yeah,
stars.
they're taking the piss out of me all the time. But
yeah, yeah. Claudio, tell us a little bit about your involvement with UNICEF. You have been.
That's more Ewan and Charley. I think Charley now is ambassador for them as well.
Yeah.
I was just part of it when we were filming it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've been with the car, electric car. You've been with the electric motorcycle, and you were telling me that now you have a new project.
Oh yeah.
With a electric truck.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Back to the trucks.
Yeah, no.
Finally, you get use
real.
of your license.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's quite. Yeah, as I said, I was really intrigued in 2010 with the Racing Green project, with these young engineers with the electric car. And then we had the electric bikes, first ones going across South America. And now I, by chance, have an opportunity to film a new story which is happening right now as we speak. 3 Swiss engineers. They are very good sports people. They are up in the mountains in Switzerland, climbing, paragliding, mountain biking, everything. And they always wondered, they're very good technicians, engineers, and then they wondered why all the agricultural machinery in the Swiss Alps, or anywhere in the mountains, is all diesel. It could be electric. And then they said they felt it would be an interesting challenge to see whether they can convert one of these electric trucks made, a very, very good 4x4 truck made for difficult terrain for farmers up in the mountains. So they decided they want to convert it to electric, and then to prove the point that this electric version is better than what they had before with a diesel engine, they want to do an altitude world record on the highest volcano in the world, which is border between Chile and Argentina, Ojos del Salado, and it's nearly 7,000 meters. And so I thought that's exactly that's the story which I like. And so I'm at the moment filming them building the truck, and then hopefully they need to do some tests in the Swiss mountains, and then end of the year they want to ship it. They want to ship it to Chile, and then I don't know whether I get up to 7,000 meters, but it would be fun.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a common trace in your work that you always want to do something different. You already gave a little explanation with that. Being in the wars that nobody is, or doing long journeys with electric cars or electric bikes. Why is that?
Yeah, I just I'm very curious, and I like to discover constantly new things, and my job as a documentary filmmaker is perfect because you always get involved in new stories, and I like to have an insight into projects of other people, into the life of other people, and so whenever there is an opportunity of something which is a little bit extreme, you push the boundaries. I quite like that as well, to always, even now with this electric truck, as I say, I'm not sure whether I will be capable, because I will be 60 this year, and will I be able to get to 7,000 meters? I don't know, but exactly because of that, I want to try. Yeah. So it's just curiosity. Yeah, that is great. And no more guerrilla stuff and war stuff. And I never say no, but generally what I realized with all the political stories, particularly if you do it over a long time, it can be so depressive. Depressing. It's so depressing because if I look back at various places where I made films in the past, like starting in Afghanistan, you look at Afghanistan today, it's still a mess. You look at Israel and Palestine, it's still a mess. You look at the Congo, it's still a mess. And so it's just so depressing. At the beginning you start this job hoping that your work as a journalist will help to find solutions, to kind of eliminate the conflicts, to have kind of more chances for peace. And then you look back and you realize actually it didn't help at all. And the Papuans, in West Papua, you look at their situation today, nothing improved, nothing at all. Yeah. And so that's very depressing. Yeah. So I cannot do it all the time. And it was very lucky that I stumbled onto the Long Way series, which kind of opened a totally new direction, which is adventure entertainment, and that's somehow, easier to digest as well for your mind, for your mental balance. It's actually really nice, and particularly now these jobs where I can combine adventure with new technology is really cool. I like that a lot. Great. How do you like to define yourself, Claudio? Journalist, filmmaker, adventurer? Yeah, I think nice guy. Yeah, it's just storyteller.
Storyteller, fantastic.
Yeah, documentary filmmaker, and it's the whole package. It comes together. You know, it's good if you know how to use cameras. It's good if you can edit. It's good to connect with people, because that's the key. If you make a film, you know, you need people in front of the camera who trust you, that you don't stitch them up, and that you tell their story in a fair way. And so I just like the combination of lots of different skills. Yeah.
When will we have the chance to see one of your movies, documentaries, here in Lisbon Motorcycle Film Fest?
There's actually one film, I think it would fit perfectly here, which I did in 2017. So this was still when ISIS was just the end of ISIS in Iraq. And the thing is, Charley Boorman, he works together with a guy called Billy Ward. Billy Bike Truck is his kind of social media name. And Billy, he similar age like me, and he started to organize motorbike trips with Charley, with clients all over the world, in Africa, in Australia, in South America. And he wanted to do stuff with me. And I said, look, I'm too busy, too many other things. But by the way, if you want to do motorbike trips, you know, adventure motorbikes, you should go to places where nobody goes, you know, something really exotic. That's where you need to go. And yeah, what do you mean? I said, look, you should do a motorbike trip in Iraq, because that's exclusive.
Okay.
And so
okay, thank you.
Basically, I talked him into it to do a trip with a motorbike trip in Iraq, while still ISIS was fighting in Mosul and places like that. And we made a film about it, which is called The Kurdish Movie. The Kurdish Movie. And that's something you could show here, because it's hilarious. It's completely crazy.
Shaquin, take a note. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, definitely. I'm done with questions.
Yeah.
Some questions from the floor. Who wants to know something else about Claudio and his work? Do you have... temos microfone?
I have a small question.
No.
You've been commissioned as a reporter for many places. You've done the Long Way series. Which country you haven't visited yet?
Yeah, I think I worked... With all these projects, I worked in over 100 countries around the world. But there are, you know, how many we have? 192. So I have seen about half of the countries. So I haven't seen much in Asia, all the little countries, you know, the little islands in the Pacific. So I don't know that. And then in Africa, I have seen, I think, 38 countries out of 54. So there are quite a few I haven't seen yet.
Yeah. Lá atrás.
I know Charley and Ewan give their bikes to museums, but you kept yours. You have it from the first one around.
Yeah,
Why did you give it? Did you buy it? Or?
No. I was fortunate. BMW, they gave it to me. And so that's why I still have it. And Ewan, he sold his one for charity. And then Charley, I think Charley's bike ended up in a museum somewhere in the UK. And I was just lucky to still have my little baby, and I'm very emotionally attached. Yeah, and it's nearly 20 years old now, and it still runs smoothly, no problem. Yeah, it's just nice to have a machine where you know that you know, machine got you all the way around the world, and it's just an amazing idea. Yeah.
Mais alguma questão?
You have quite a busy life with every documentaries and movies. Do you still ride your bike regularly? Do you take any trips around Switzerland or
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have that much time. And then in the area where I was over 30 years in London, and then I moved back to Switzerland in October 2020. And I'm up in the mountains where you have about 4 or 5 months snow in in the year. So up there I can't really use it very much. But now it's perfect season. It just started in May. You can do trips, and once in a while I use it, but not very often, unfortunately. Too many other things happening.
Mais perguntas? Lá atrás.
Yeah, it depends a lot on the technology. So the long way round was still shot on real video cameras with the mini DV tapes, just small, but it was still on videotapes, and it was before GoPro, and Ewan and Charley, we all had like special helmet cameras, but these cameras, they needed to record on proper video tapes, and so it was all connected with cables. And then in the on the tank bag, we had the video recorder. So that was just a little bit, more complicated than today when you just get a GoPro and it's easy. You just press a button and everything runs. So the technology certainly changed. Long Way Down was still on videotape, and then Long Way Up was quite different because now everything is like on memory cards, and we had many more cameras. We had like GoPros, or I had like the Sony action cams. We had little DJI, lots of little cameras now, which are still quite amazing, all 4K. So the technology became more complicated, and you have to charge everything, and so you are quite absorbed with keeping all the cameras going. But then in the edit, of course, and the big thing with Long Way Up was the drone footage. That's totally new. But the essence in terms of directing, somehow what keeps me most busy, or my brain active. I always say when I work, I probably use 80% of my brain for sound. I need to listen what people say, and ideally the films, kind of what I try to achieve is to give editors enough material that they don't need any voiceover at the end. So that the people you film in front of the camera, so in this case mainly Ewan and Charley, and then the people they meet, they should say enough to tell the whole story in their own words without having a narration afterwards to explain where you are, what happens and why. So you should always make sure the people in front of the camera tell you that. So then it feels much more natural, it feels much more convincing than having just a kind of a voice of God narration in the background. And to make that happen, it takes quite a lot of, you need to memorize a lot, and sometimes you need to guide people a little bit to tell them, look, can you give me a quote where you say 1, 2, 3 points, just to have the sound. And that, it doesn't matter what camera system have, whether you have a drone footage, what doesn't matter. That's still a job you just need to do, even before and now. It still it stays the same. Yeah.
Aqui à frente.
Just coming back a bit on your interest to see the islands or the Pacific. And it's not a question, it's a suggestion, because you could look at electric boats, because it's also one of the major problems we have in climate change. And there's big breakthroughs on the electric boats, so that could be interesting.
Very
good suggestion.
Very good suggestion. I need your details. No, I really enjoy it. It's so cool. It's just amazing to see what's possible, and as well, they even start building planes, electric planes. But then it's funny, the guys, with regards to, it's good to work with engineers because they keep the ground under their feet. They are not dreaming. They are not going crazy. They always calculate things. And it was very funny, these guys who are building the electric truck at the moment, one of them is as well a pilot. And he did a little story, like a video diary story, going on a round with an electric plane in Switzerland. And the plane, they can fly about 1 hour, and it's perfect for training pilots, to start, to land, and it doesn't make noise. But then this guy, David, he started to make calculations exactly how much power they used to fly for an hour, and then he calculated. So at that time he calculated that the solar panels on his roof at home, they still produced 3 times more than what he was burning in 1 hour flight in the day. So he was still on the green side. But then he started to go further and calculated how much electricity you would need at Zurich Airport, so that's the biggest airport in Switzerland, to produce enough energy to supply all the planes, which now get kerosene. And these figures, they publish the figures, so you can see exactly how much kerosene airports need to fuel the planes. So he took that figure, he calculated how much power that is, and how much, how big the power plants need to be to provide the same energy, in case you have the technology to store that energy in battery. At the moment it doesn't exist, but let's say you could have in future the batteries to actually store enough energy like what you now tank in kerosene. He said, Zurich Airport on its own, they would need 3 nuclear power plants right there. So it's massive. Or like the entire aviation traffic in the world, 7,000 nuclear power plants. So we just need to be realistic. It's just to have a jumbo jet flying. It just takes so much energy, and so to have that on electric, we are not yet there. Not yet there.
You have seen the passenger boats that cross the desert, that old ones.
Yeah.
They are very old, very polluting, and they are now going to be replaced all by electric in the following years. And it was a political decision, and we hope it will be good.
Yeah, brilliant.
It's a good test of the pollution that boats make on the water.
On the water is, yeah. No, I would be very interested to have a look at that as well. Would be really cool. Yeah.
One more question over there.
If you want to tell a story around Switzerland, what would it mean?
In Switzerland.
Yeah.
With your
How you mean? Just any story?
grab your motorcycle, and what will you tell about Switzerland?
Sure.
You visit foreign countries.
Yeah.
How about if you visit your own country and you want to tell a story visually, what would it be?
Yeah, it certainly would involve all the beauty of the mountains, which all sorts of corners are not really well known. You have some major traffic, some major mountain passes, which motorcyclists they use a lot. But then you have like little trails, kind of dirt trails, which nobody really knows. And that would be interesting, but I'm not quite sure how far it's feasible, because lots of the little trails, they are sometimes it's forbidden for motorbikes. Yeah. But certainly there would be some really cool cool areas. And I always like the beauty of nature. I really like it. It's kind of good for your mind, just to calm down.
Yeah. Mais perguntas? Não? Sim.
Just to finish, I know that BMW wasn't the first choice. Charley loved KTM, and we were talking about that. Can you share that story with us?
There's a very beautiful scene on the movie.
Yeah, it was actually that scene, when they started to organize Long Way Round. As I said, I only joined the crew like 2 weeks before departure, so there were all sorts of stories happening before, which were filmed by Jimmy, the second cameraman, the American guy, very young American guy, who was then in the support crew. And Jimmy was along the trip, on all 3 trips. And so Jimmy was involved right at the beginning of Long Way Round, filming everything what Ewan and Charley were doing in the workshops, preparing themselves. So they were looking for the sponsors for the bikes. And Charley, because he is, he really did a lot of off-road riding, and he knew that the KTMs, they were the best, and they would be very suited, and that's why they often winning the Dakar races, because they are just made for off-road. Yeah. And then, the bike we ended up with, BMW, was more comfortable, but really heavy for off-road. And so Charley was really pushing for the KTM, and then KTM apparently. So I wasn't there. I haven't seen this myself. So I'm just telling what they explained what happened. So there was a guy coming across from KTM to meet them in London and to assess whether Ewan and Charley will be, whether it's worthwhile to sponsor them with these bikes and whether they are capable to ride it. And then this Austrian guy, he felt that he himself is a much better rider than Ewan and Charley, and that they are just jokers and they have no clue. And he just felt if KTM sponsors something, they should sponsor him instead of these guys. Only because they are actors doesn't mean they know how to ride motorcycles. So basically that's what he reported back home, and KTM then didn't sponsor it. And much later I then met the guy who took the decision not to sponsor it, and he said, "You know what happened to me? I lost my job." He joked about it. So he joked about it. It's just you don't always make the right decisions in your life. Sometimes. And it's a gamble like that. And it was true. Ewan and Charley. Yeah, Charley, he was quite good off-road. Ewan didn't have the experience. I didn't have the experience. So, and we were very lucky to actually made the Road of Bone. It was a lot of luck, because everybody said at the beginning you can't do it, because in winter it's just snow and ice, you can't do it. And then afterwards in summer it's all melting, the permafrost is melting, it's all swamp, and you get stuck in the swamp. And we still felt, or Ewan and Charley, they felt, we still try, we still go. And so the closer we got to Siberia, Road of Bones, then you start to talk to the local truck drivers, and they say, "You must be joking, you can't do it, you can't do it." Everybody was always saying, the closer we got, the more they were saying, "You can't do it." And we eventually only managed it. There was a window probably of about 1 week where we just by chance got that window. It's basically just before the permafrost melts. So the ground was still frozen, but no more snow. And because once the ground starts melting, then the water level in the rivers goes up like crazy, and you couldn't cross the rivers anymore. And then later we didn't have any rain. We had like 1 day of rain, and that's the scene in the show. You can see the scene when we needed to cross the rivers with massive trucks, with these Kamaz trucks, and and even these trucks struggled. And it was just one day of rain, and because the ground is frozen, all the water goes straight into the rivers. So in no time the rivers are woof up, like 1-2 meters more water overnight. Yeah. And then you have to wait for 2-3 days to go down, and that's when we could cross with the truck. But if we would have had a little bit more rain, finished, not possible. Or a little bit later with melting ground, not possible. And so we were just lucky that 1 week we got the... Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Claudio, thank you very much. It was an honor to have you. You'll be always welcome here. Thank you.